How's it going, everybody? So in this video, I'm going to be discussing what I believe is the healthiest way of eating for all human beings. So I've made many videos about this in the past, mostly talking about how to customize nutrition to your own specific dietary needs and your own diseases and your own kind of conditions and your own goals that you are striving towards in your current period of life, whether that's to reverse a disease or to improve your energy, resolve an autoimmune illness, or to provide simple fat loss or blood sugar regulation. I've made videos about that in the past. In this video, we're going to be tackling the topic that people tend to really want to hear about when they think about the best diet for human beings, and that's basically this dogmatic tribe. Like what is the ideal tribe that I want to follow, right? Is it the vegan diet? Is it the carnivore diet? So we can go around to our friends and criticize them for not eating an optimal diet, basically, right? Or maybe you're just curious, because that's kind of like a fun thought experiment. Like, if everyone on the planet followed this diet, they would all experience the same improvement in their health and well-being. That's kind of what people are looking for. So a universal nutrition plan that everyone can reap the same benefits from. So this is a very important topic to talk about, especially for people who watch my content, knowing kind of my approach to this is very nuanced. So first of all, there's this concept that people will say. Okay, so there's some people that believe that one diet is the best diet for all humans, like all humans should only eat meat because it's a species appropriate diet, or else the vegans. All humans should only eat, vegan because the science shows that meat causes all these problems and this and that, right? That's typically the first extreme that you'll find is people believe that there's one tribe. Then the second extreme is complete opposite, but equally as absurd, where people are like, there is no one best diet, and the best diet is going to be entirely dependent upon you and your own genetics and this and that. Like, basically, it's either all human beings should follow one diet, or else everyone's their own special snowflake, and there's no universal principles that we can follow, and you should just eat what makes you feel the best, okay? And so let's dive into the snowflake syndrome group of people first, because this one is the most important, and I feel like this one needs to be criticized the most, okay? I feel like we all know that, dogmatically following one diet paradigm and thinking everyone else should follow it is pretty bad. It's not very useful. But I feel like the special snowflake people don't get criticized enough, and this is the most important thing to understand. So just to say, you're going to have to find what works for you, and then once you do, just screw all the information telling you that it's wrong. I feel like that's horrible advice, because I, for a long time, was a vegan, and I was eating a raw vegan diet, and I thought this was the best diet ever. And the problem is there's a lot of hype surrounding all diet tribes and paradigms, right? And I was like, I found what works for me. Raw vegan diet, reversed my psoriasis, reversed my irritable bowel syndrome, and I thought I was feeling on cloud 9. The problem is I felt great for 3 weeks and then started experiencing extreme tiredness and fatigue and lethargy. When you look at the raw vegan diet camps, literally all of them think that they found the best diet that works for them. And they may have reversed a lot of their diseases, whether it's, diabetes, heart disease, in some cases cancer, and autoimmune illness. A lot of these things have been reversed on raw vegan diets. However, maybe they reverse all of these diseases that they had experienced before, but they have other problems that they now struggle with and deal with. And because they feel like they've made so much progress and reversed all these other conditions, they think that this diet can do no wrong. And it's like, well, it is the diet, and they become so dogmatic about the diet that they believe worked good for them. And then it's reinforced by some of these really, these other people, these diet gurus, these raw vegan gurus who have all the scientific evidence or the spiritual backing, like rot meats in your intestine and, it's the karmic debt that you got to repay. And they have all this crazy justifications for why their diet is the best diet. And if you start experiencing health problems, it's like it can't be the diet because this diet worked for me. It reversed all my diseases and stuff. It must be the detox. It was all the meat that I ate all these years. I spent 20 years of my life eating all this meat, and I expect, 2 months of being vegan to reverse all my health problems. No, I got to detox on the raw vegan diet for 20 years to get rid of the 20 years of meat eating I did before. This is the weird justification that in their mind, the weird mentality that comes to justify the dogma. And it's like, this worked for me, And so, people have a hard time digesting or receiving this idea that just because it worked for you at a certain point in time for some issues doesn't mean it's the best thing for you. It's hard for people to understand because they want to believe that, first of all, people want to believe that they're right. It's the confirmation bias type of thing that goes on. Second of all, health is very complicated and there's a lot of conflicting advice on all fronts. So it's like very, very hard to find what works for you in the first place. People that get any progress at all in their health goals and reverse any diseases, especially autoimmune at first, is a huge accomplishment in and of itself. So it's like they've already passed the first hurdle that most average people don't pass. And I can tell you, as a health consultant, a nutritionist, and a personal trainer of over 10 years now, dealing with people with severe health conditions, minor health conditions, and people just looking for fat loss even, right? The biggest thing for people to do at first is to just find something that gives them, some sort of success at all. And then the consistency part, being consistent with one program for longer than a year, that is only like 10 to 20% of people, if even that, can even do that at first, right? But then to find that protocol that gave you success at first, that you were able to find sustainable, isn't working anymore, that is such a hard freaking thing to fathom, right? So anyway, where I'm going with this is there is a problem with using anecdotal evidence to guide your behavior problems, okay? Or to guide your behaviors, to guide your nutritional paradigm or your diet, okay? There is a problem with only using anecdotal evidence, okay? And there is a problem with the idea of just do what works for you and stick to that and fuck what everyone else thinks. Now, here's the thing, though. On the other end of things, I've made many videos about this in the past. I'll try to link it in the description. I did a video talking about fiber and why the recommendations on fiber are mostly raw, not accurate, and also the whole idea of a daily recommended intake of nutrients and vitamins and minerals is not really accurate either. The idea of essential fiber or essential vitamins and minerals, there's a lot of misinformation and nuance in that, and most people are operating from false information. So you should probably look at that first to understand why scientific evidence is not really a good way to guide, as a foundation for guiding principles. But there's some universal principles in human nutrition that we can follow that probably do apply to everyone, okay? So if you follow if it works for you, then just roll with it type of paradigm, that shit can lead you down a rabbit hole of just like being lost forever, or finding something that works and then eventually becomes your downfall, right? Many people found this with the vegan diet. And many people actually will follow a program like the vegan diet or the, paleo diet or carnivore diet or whatever from scientific evidence itself. And then there's another thing where I'll get comments sometimes from people that are like, screw the raw vegan diet and screw the carnivore diet, and why do we have to like follow these extreme diets or these strict diet protocols? Whatever happened to just eating normal or eating a balanced diet? And to me, these people just sound like lazy, cognitively lazy. They're just as bad as the people, just do what works for you and blah, blah, blah. They don't want to analyze it. They don't want to think about it. And if they did actually reflect on their question, why do people follow these extreme diets? What they'd find is it's because people deal with extreme health problems that no mainstream medical doctor has the answer for, and a balanced nutritional diet clearly has not been solving. So I hate getting comments like that, especially on my channel. My channel is about critical thinking and critically analyzing our choices and our health problems so we can, through trial and error and scientific evidence and anecdotal experiences, find what works best and overcome our health problems. If you're just like, oh, screw it, I'm just going to follow a balanced diet, why can't everyone else just eat a regular omnivorous diet? You're never going to find your health problems either. You're just like, what the fuck are you going to do? Just eat like standard American diet or whatever? Or, just whole foods. As long as you eat whole foods, you're going to be healthy. That's not fucking true. That's absolutely not fucking true. All right, so anyway, yeah, special snowflake syndrome, not good. I'll make a whole isolated video just diving deep into that subject. But let's talk about universal principles that I think everyone should follow. So look, here's the thing. Protein, number one, okay? There is a lot of evidence that human beings benefit from more protein, and there's very little evidence that you can even reach a threshold of protein intake that gives you negative results, okay? Unless you follow vegan extremism, where they use weak evidence to support their claims that protein, especially from animal origin, is bad, which I have all the books of these scientists, but, people don't give a fuck. They want to believe what they want to believe. Basically, there's not been a lot of studies that show, in clinical trials that show you can even eat in excess of protein. So protein's actually been studied in clinical trials. There's been like a 3-month study, for example, where people ate varying amounts of protein. There was a group that ate half of their body weight in grams of protein, and then one gram of protein per pound of body weight, and then there were 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight, and then there was one group on the highest end that ate 3 grams of protein per pound of body weight, and they studied the effects of all of them, and they equated for calories, and it was an excess calorie study, where basically what they found was, so all of them were eating in a caloric surplus, and they're eating the same surplus of calories. Only the higher protein group was getting their excess calories from protein, whereas the under-eating protein group was eating more carbs and or fats. It was actually a mix of both, right? And what they found is the group eating more protein, like the 3 grams of protein per pound of body weight, and they all had an excess of body weight that was relatively, on average, similar or the same. They all had an excess amount of body fat. What they found is the groups that were eating more protein, in a dose-dependent response, the more those excess calories were coming from extra protein, the more lean mass was to blame for the excess body weight. So they all had an increase in body weight that were about the same. And they're all eating in a caloric surplus. The only difference is the more that those excess calories came from extra protein, the more that extra body weight came from lean mass. So what that shows us is if you're eating extra protein, okay, most of that extra protein, if anything, is going to go towards more lean mass gain. And I believe that there was something like an increase in 3 kilograms of lean mass over the course of 3 months in the excess protein group. And I don't think they were even doing any strength training in that program. Also, it's never been shown that extra protein converts into excess body fat. There's not been many studies that show a noticeable increase, and this study kind of demonstrates that pretty conclusively. There's also been studies that show that they took sedentary humans who worked at a desk job, and they took one group of those humans who ate they're all eating around 60 grams of protein per day on average. And they had one group who just continued eating that same amount. Then they had another group who were instructed to double their protein intake, right? So to go from 60 to 120 grams per day. And what they found is a group who doubled their protein intake and ate 120 grams per day, they had a significant increase in lean muscle gain without even doing resistance training. And then, of course, the group who was eating the regular amount of protein at baseline, they had no increase in muscle mass at all. So again, it kind of shows that the human body wants more protein and wants to hold on to more lean mass, but most people seem to just be under-eating protein and not able to actually achieve that gain in lean mass. So that's scientifically. And we also know, on average, the primary cause of death past the age of 65 is due to low bone mineral density, tragic falls and bone fractures and the result of staying in a hospital after fracturing bones and breaking hips and stuff. Things like pneumonia and edema and, cerebral edema, like water retention and stuff, swelling in the brain and stuff like that. All of this stuff happens in elderly populations who have low bone mineral density, low muscle mass and strength, and low self-efficacy, meaning they can't take care of themselves as they get older. So things like osteopenia, osteoporosis, and sarcopenia, basically low muscle mass, low bone mineral density, basically deterioration of the structural tissue as you age is a primary leading cause of death. It really is. These plant-based people will make you think that protein is the cause of all ills, and if you want to live a long time, stop eating protein. They'll make you think that all you need to do is eat your kale and your vegetables and get sunlight and do yoga. The fact is you need more strength training, you need more protein intake, you need to become more robust and strengthen the structures of your bones and your muscles. The other thing is the leading indicators of longevity in elderly populations is actually muscle tone, just basically meaning muscle mass, grip strength, and bone mineral density. Okay? Also, there is a high correlation with higher LDL as you age and longevity. Okay? And I'm just going to throw that out there for this. You could say reverse causation all you want. If you're, science savvy and you're on the plant-based side of things, you'll say, oh, it's reverse causation or some crap. But just keep that in mind, that higher LDL as you age is correlated with better health outcomes. With lower LDL in elderly populations is highly correlated with an increased risk of all-cause mortality, basically dying. Statin drugs as well. They'll decrease your risk of heart disease by a small margin, but significantly increase your risk of Alzheimer's and dying of all-cause mortality as you age. And I have found for sure in my own kind of anecdotal experience, most of the people, the relatives and family members I know that have heart attacks and they go plant-based and they get on statin drugs and stuff, they still end up dying within the next 5 years anyway. Usually, not always. And they usually eat a lot of vegetable oils leading into that. They're usually eating margarine as a main fat and lots of refined sugar and carbohydrates. They're usually not eating a bunch of butter and meat and stuff like I've been doing for the last like 5 years. So anyway, so there's a lot more to this as well. But the main thing, the other thing is like people who go from eating less protein to eating more protein. So we also know that high protein diets, meaning around, really in the scientific literature, it's something like 0.8 grams of protein per pound of lean mass. Okay, is highly correlated. It's actually been shown in clinical trials to lower hemoglobin A1C, meaning average blood glucose over time. Lower body fat percentage, even without like caloric restriction. You're able to lower body fat, lower weight over time on average, lower blood pressure readings. Pretty much all metrics, blood metrics over time improve, and blood triglycerides as well, just by prioritizing protein. And one of the major things that is always done in all successful fat loss routines, I've seen this as a personal trainer, but it's taught in evidence-based nutrition certifications, which I have a couple on my wall. They teach you to prioritize protein as a goal. Preferably 1 gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight is the best recommendation. And what you find, and you'll find testimonials of this and all sorts of things, there's people who eat whatever they want. There's the if it fits your macros type of thing, where they eat Pop-Tarts and stuff as long as they keep their calories low, but they just prioritize protein, 1 gram per pound of lean mass. And there's people that have reverse diabetes on that protocol. 1 gram of protein per pound of lean mass, allowing themselves Pop-Tarts and stuff, and then doing strength training, they reverse diabetes, get fat loss super low, etc. I found as a personal trainer, when my clients just do caloric restriction, they oftentimes don't lose a lot of body fat, but when they start to eat substantially more protein, suddenly all the body fat drops. Females will see their cycles regulate, appetite starts to go up, sleep starts to become more regular. There's a lot of magical things that happen when you just start to eat adequate protein, especially from animal protein. So what I'm getting at here is universally, prioritizing protein should be the goal. And these are all the science on that universal principle. So that's the first thing. So there are universal principles at play. The next thing is obviously energy needs. You need a certain amount of calories to sustain your energy. Now, there's a heavy debate in the scientific literature whether that energy should come from, mostly fat or primarily carbohydrate or a mix of both. And, anyone who is dogmatically following one paradigm or the other will say, oh, the science says you should only eat fat and be keto, or you should only eat high carb or this or that. What I'll say is it seems to be individual. This seems to be where the special snowflake thing comes into play. This is the art of the diet thing. For me as a practitioner, as a health consultant and a nutritionist, I've found, first of all, I personally, for some reason, cannot do high-carb diets. My mental performance, my physical performance, my sleep, I feel like shit when I eat a high-carb diet. I just do. And I've been an athlete for most of my life, and only at a certain point in my life, a doctor scared me and claimed I had diabetes, which is crazy. My point is, though, I'm the type of person that should not have diabetes. Super lean, everything. So it's not like, oh, I'm diabetic, right? But for some reason, my body has a terrible reaction to carbohydrates. Terrible. And I've gone into detail in other videos, but I feel like I don't want to go into detail because people think I'm crazy, but it is night and day. When I'm on high carb, can't sleep, extreme brain fog, mood swings like a motherfucker. I'm always feeling dizzy and lethargic and just horrible. my physical performance is extremely low. Have no energy for workouts. Feel this just like weird anxiety. It's just crazy. It's just weird. I don't want to go into too much detail, but what I find is doing mostly a ketogenic protocol, and eating and prioritizing fatty meat, and then doing little bit of carbohydrates, just maybe surrounding some workouts, but very, very rarely and sparingly, right? Mostly coming from fruit along with my meat usually at the end of the day. I feel better than I've ever felt in my life, and I'm eating under 50 grams a day as an athlete, a competitive athlete. People who strictly and dogmatically follow scientific literature will tell you that that's bullshit and that you should always eat a lot of carbs, especially as an athlete, that you're going to like somehow run out of glucose and glycogen if you don't eat carbs, which is dumb because you'd basically die if that was the case. But I've won gold medals on a freaking ketogenic protocol. You know what I mean? And my opponent's eating lots of carbs. You know, I see some snacking on fruit on their way up to the competition. I still smash the shit out of them. And I routinely will do that in sport and jiu-jitsu practice to carb eaters all the time. So this idea that you need carbohydrates as an ideal fuel source, you know, it'll work really well for the people who do well on carbs. You know, some people, if you can handle them, sure, that'll work. But it really fucks up people who have trouble with carbohydrates. This is a thing that I've seen in dogmatic nutrition circles, okay? People who follow this carbs are scientifically supported, you need carbs, all this shit. They hide behind evidence-based and like, oh, I'm a science-based practitioner, because if you look at the scientific literature through the dogma, through the confirmation bias, through the lens, the paradigm that carbs are essential, you'll see glaringly obvious evidence that at certain percentages of your VO2 max, you just cannot synthesize enough ATP from fat and you need carbs. But if you start to look at the scientific literature through the lens of someone who understands ketosis and low carb requirements and the adaptation process and stuff, there's a lot of evidence that actually shows your metabolism over time will adapt to be able to burn double the rate, to produce double the rate of ATP from beta oxidation, where you can actually burn fat at over 90% of your VO2 max. The idea that for glycolytic activity you need to eat carbs to fuel that, otherwise that system just won't work, is absolute stupidity. Your body will adapt to the demands placed upon it over time. And so anyway, lots of misinformation even in keto land around this, thinking that if you eat too much protein, it'll turn into glucose, and that's how gluconeogenesis works. And that's false. It actually prioritizes the burning of body fat, converting the glycerol backbone of triglycerides and free fatty acids into glucose, and you can refill glycogen that way as well as the kind of mystery of the fat droplets that have been discovered in recent years that can actually take the place of glycogen. People don't know about that. Anyway, so this is why it's important to look at anecdotal reports, okay? People like me, I struggled for so long thinking I need to eat pounds of greens a day to be healthy, thinking wasting all that money, and only to find out those pounds of greens a day were contributing directly to my irritable bowel syndrome and psoriasis. And then beyond that, and the oatmeal I thought I had to eat for essential minerals, which I now realize is complete stupidity. And then I remember my experiments in 2017, 2018, where I was eating like 600 grams of carbs a day in order to improve my athletic performance, only to find it really caused extreme mood swings, lethargy, and my athletic performance was not affected by the amount of carbs I was eating. What I found was, first of all, the protein in my diet was the most important thing for my athletic performance. When I undereat protein, my strength gains substantially deteriorate, even though my programming is on point. I was even working with a coach at one point in time. And also my jiu-jitsu performance. But when I increase my protein, the greater I increase my protein. It's going to sound crazy to some people because they think, oh, you hit a point of diminishing returns, bro. But no, the more protein I eat in my diet, the better my recovery is from training, the better my sleep is, the better I feel overall, and also the better my athletic performance is. And when I went carnivore in November, it was actually December of 2018, okay? And I completely stopped carbs. I doubled my calorie intake, doubled my protein intake, and stopped doing cardio because I had a hip injury. I actually dropped 15 pounds of body weight, and on a body fat scan, I actually had dropped something like 7% body fat somehow. And all of my lifts started going up. I started doing Olympic lifting for reps. I increased my clean and jerk from like 185 pounds for a set of 3 to 185 pounds for a set of 9 for a full-on clean and jerk. And that is a energy system that should not be improving by removing carbs. You could say, oh, it's because you increase your calorie intake and decrease your cardio, and therefore you had more calories and energy available. But that has nothing to do with glycogen. If you need fucking glycogen and glucose to perform physical activity, then you shouldn't, no matter how much your calories are increasing, you should not see that dramatic of improvement in glycolytic energy systems. But I did. This was in 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks, I saw substantial improvements in my glycolytic performance. It was actually 3 weeks. 3 weeks. My clean and jerk went from 185 pounds for 3 to 185 pounds for 9. And then my low end strength endurance, it was actually power endurance, I guess. Lactic capacity improved. And my high end strength also was improving. I had clean and jerked like 225 pounds for a set of 3 during that time. So, and this is backed by a lot of other athletes that actually had the bravery enough to go through the adaptation phase and try it out for themselves. The problem is no one ever figures this out because they are noceboed in thinking that removing carbs is just universally bad, and then they don't do the trial and error that they need, and if they do, they lower their training intensity during that time, expecting low carbs to actually fuck them up. So why am I even talking about this in this video? I'm talking about this because a lot of people assume that you need carbs as a universal principle for all humans. So this whole thing of the ideal diet is kind of simple but also complicated at the same time. It's complicated because everyone out there is telling you that their way is the best way. And so because you're like trying to find this box that you can fit yourself into and blindly follow, you don't know who to believe because you're looking for somebody to fucking believe. But if you approach this differently and you stop approaching this as who can I trust? Who can I believe? And instead you look at all of this as like different toolboxes of possibilities and possible information and different perspectives and different opinions. And then you also can see, well, who is just kind of like, who is operating from bias and stuff, and then who is trying to tell me what to think and who is trying to tell me how to think. You know what I mean? And who's giving me these like just perspectives of information and stuff, and then who's giving me these beliefs? There's a difference between information and data and beliefs. And so for me, I try to give more information and try to discuss how to think more. But it's kind of hard to not give you my own like beliefs and opinions and dogma at the same time. But anyway, so I think there's universal principles. I think protein intake and I think animal foods is the main thing. You can I think that's the first thing. And I think after that, you need to find what works best for you. And I think if carbs don't work well for you, there's a lot of reasons why. The type of carbs matter. right? Fruit versus starch versus whatever. And then fiber intake, some people don't deal with that. And then the other thing is salt intake. If you're doing a low carb diet and you experience extreme problems, a lot of time that's because you need substantially more salt than you previously thought. And a lot of people have trouble eating the tablespoon throughout the day that is recommended. Yeah, I said fucking tablespoon, not teaspoon. People are like, oh, that's like 6 grams of sodium. That's insane. Our ancestors never did that. It's like, yeah, they did. They followed herbivorous animals to salt licks. They mostly evolved around the sea or lakes or oceans with lots of sodium and salt. They purposely sought out the saltiest plant foods in their environment that's rich in sodium and mineral content. They ate a lot of bugs and insects that were high in sodium, and they did, in fact, consume the blood of animals, even though some people try to say that they didn't. A lot of researchers missed the areas of sodium that they actually did consume. So, and the Inuits, for example, would boil down ice water, salt water, that was icified, and they actually purposely sought out. They had like specific locations where they'd find the saltiest ice to boil down and turn into salt water to prevent that low sodium kind of issue that can happen when people fast and when people do low carb diets. So you'll never find that if you just go for what works for you. If you're just like, oh, low carb didn't work for me because I felt dizzy and lethargic and no performance, and then even worse, it's made worse by looking at the, well, that's because the scientific evidence says I need carbs and this and that. It's low blood sugar. It's like, not actually, it's because you need more salt if you're doing that at first. But they don't do their due diligence. And then there's a lot of experts that are on YouTube that say, you don't need extra salt on low carb. If blah, blah, blah. And then what happens when they follow that advice? They feel like shit. They feel lethargic. They have muscle cramps. And they're like, oh, well, low carb didn't work for me. It's not salt because Stephanie Keto Person or, Dr. Berg or whoever said I don't need salt, on the low carb diet. So I guess I just can't do low carb because I feel dizzy and lethargic and have muscle cramps. And then Paul Saladino, right, comes out telling you need fruit and shit. It's like, meanwhile, these people didn't consume enough salt. So yeah, admittedly, yeah. If you're not willing to go through if you're not willing to read deeply on the subject and then go through the trial and error process and actually apply this information to fully find what works for you, but also using these principles, then you're fucked. And it's like, on one side of things, I can't be mad at people. I can't blame people for, struggling with this process and for not understanding things and stuff, because I guess I take for granted how long it took me to really figure all this stuff out. It literally, I started this in 2011, really, when I was feeling like shit and I got off all my meds. I was on extremely high doses of extremely hardcore, high-impact pharmaceuticals at the time. Got off that medication. 2012 was horrible for me. Panic attacks, irritable bowel syndrome, psoriasis, terrible. Felt like shit all the time. Didn't know what the hell was wrong with me. 2014 really started to figure things out when I did the ultimate fuck up and went vegan. Then I realized, these vegan foods, the fiber and stuff is a main contributing factor. Went mostly paleo, ate mostly meat. But also fruit, meat, and non-starchy veg. And that was like the magical mixture for me for some reason. And then tried a bunch of bread and tried all these other carbs for a long time and just felt like shit all the time. Then went carnivore in 2018. I was like, oh shit, this is the thing for me. Literally, the main thing that I find works across the board for everybody is increasing the amount of animal protein in their diet first. That is the most important thing you can do. And then if you're going to eat fruit or you're going to eat carbs, just find the carbs that you can tolerate. If you have autoimmune disease, you need to do a serious elimination diet. If you have autoimmune disease, if you have digestive problems, you need to remove all the plant foods and then slowly add them back one by one. And a lot of people will tell you, well, that's just going to cause food intolerances. because you kill off the gut microbiome. But look, I actually found after like 3 or 4 years of strict, mostly carnivore eating where I didn't have any of these grains, when I added back oatmeal, if I soaked it in an acidic medium like apple cider vinegar overnight, I was able to tolerate them again. But only in small amounts at first. And if I ate too much too soon, started having the digestive problems and the itchiness and the psoriasis again. So I think a lot of people suffer from pathogens in their intestine that are contributed to probably by antibiotics and then made worse by these foods that they try to force themselves to eat. And I think these pathogens will die off, like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or candida overgrowth. These pathogens will die off if you remove their food source after a while. And I used to think candida cleanses were bullshit when they recommend low-carb diets. But now what I realize is it's actually the probiotics and the supplements that they recommend to kill off candida that are actually bullshit. And what I realize is all you have to do is remove the food intolerances, remove the foods that make your symptoms worse for a long time, for at least a year, maybe 2 years. And eventually those pathogens will completely die off, and you're able to add those foods back in over time. And the reason why, because I used to find people always struggled with candida cleanses and these things. The reason why people struggle is because they're focusing too much on supplements and they're not giving enough time for the diet to kill off the candida. And so they're so fixated on, I should be able to digest grains, I should be able to digest wheat or whatever, that they rush back into adding those to their diet. And if it doesn't work, like, oh, fuck, like, nope, still have candida symptoms. Then they try to add more supplements and raise the dose of their supplements. And, like, I have found the best thing anyone can do for their health is focus on the number one most big impact things that make the biggest difference in all humans. And that's 1 gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight and grams of protein from whole animal foods, preferentially beef and ruminant animals, secondarily pork if you can't afford beef. And then from there, assess your food intolerances and add or remove those things on top of that. And then also getting enough salt, okay? Getting enough fucking salt. Those are the biggest things at first. And whether you find the root cause of what's causing your food intolerances or any of that or not, at the very least you can survive completely find remission in almost all your health problems. I've seen people reverse multiple sclerosis, lupus, fibromyalgia doing this, and obviously diabetes and even coronary artery calcium. All of these things happen when you do this protocol. And it's mostly just the food intolerances being removed and then eating mostly meat first and then adding back whatever plant foods work for you. And then going from there, building a foundation from there. Your whole, that's it. And then after a while, you'll find that you can tolerate those foods again. But the thing is, after you go so long just eating this way, you feel so fucking awesome that you don't give a fuck. You don't even care. You don't even want to add back oats. You're like, yeah, I need to see the point. But most people, I see these plant-based people, and it's crazy. Like, their whole life revolves around eating. Like, they wake up in the morning and they eat this giant bowl of oatmeal with chia seeds and flax seeds and hemp seeds, and they add all these berries, and they do these superfood powders and all this shit. And the whole day, they're kale smoothies and this and that. They're eating a shit ton of variety of things. And then I just look back on my years when I was eating an exclusively carnivore diet, which I don't do it anymore. And I'm like, man, all I ate was 2 to 3 pounds of meat a day. And I'm like, and I look at these people and they make these vlogs with all their food and shit, and they're talking about how bloated they feel, how gassy they feel. They have all this acne. they look like they're dealing with sarcopenia, like they have no like muscle mass. They're always getting injured. They have mood imbalances and stuff. And I'm just like, I just cannot help but feel like they have a very clear and obvious malnourishment issue. And no matter how much variety of food they're eating and all this other crap that they do, they still have problems. Whereas for me, I'm like, I just eat 2 or 3 pounds of meat a day and I'm okay. And then I watch these people like Sean Baker and stuff who do the same shit. I'm just like, and I have all these Facebook groups where there's literally every day I see a couple dozen of like plain Jane grandmas and stuff who are eating nothing but meat and their problems go away. So again, I'm not saying that an all meat diet or carnivore diet is the best diet for all humans. I'm just saying like it's very obvious to me that these plant-based motherfuckers are very, very lacking in nutrition, and all of that fiber filling up their stomach gives them the false perception that they're full and fulfilled. But in reality, I think most hunger is protein hunger, and I think that if people nourish themselves with what humans probably really need, you know, how'd you survive through the Ice Age? Pretty much the majority of human evolution was definitely fueled by a meat-based diet. And I don't want to get into like, you know, if right now you had no supermarkets, like all these fruits and vegetables are shipped from halfway across the world. The majority of the plant foods that we eat year round, they come from some other region in the world. And these foods are not even meant to be available year round. Most of these plants are hybridized. They're gassed. They're sprayed with pesticides and herbicides and things. They're completely manufactured things to be made available year-round in the supermarket for humans, whereas animal foods are always available year-round. If we didn't have the supermarket, we wouldn't be able to get goji berries from China, these grains and things shipped from Argentina or wherever, bananas from Costa Rica. We wouldn't have all this shit. We wouldn't have spinach and kale and stuff because that wasn't even available 200 years ago. That was a completely man-made plant. From the mustard seed plant that was actually completely poisonous to humans. We wouldn't have all those things. What would we have? Well, we go out in nature, you'd find a berry or two, maybe a bush that wouldn't even be able to supply enough calories or protein or essential nutrients or anything to supply enough energy for a whole day. You would definitely die if all you ate was berries and plant-based foods in nature. You're going to dig up some acorns or some potatoes or tubers. How much calories is that going to give? You'd starve to death if that was all you had available. There's not enough plant foods that are edible in our natural environment to supply, you know, unless you live in Costa Rica or a tropical environment where you have, or Thailand where you have fruit all the time or whatever. The other thing is a lot of these plants in most areas of the world that we would be able, you know, that are available, they're poisonous. They really are. And the only reason why we can eat all of these surplus of, you know, fruits and vegetables and things year round is because we've hybridized them to make them less poisonous, and because we're able to artificially grow as much as we need to support caloric needs. Like raw veganism would be impossible for anyone to do unless they live in a tropic environment year round. So instead, the fact is there's always animals and there's always insects. And I know this sounds gross to people who are socially conditioned, but if you read the book Nourishing Diets by Sally Fallon, you'll see most humans naturally consume a lot of bugs and insects and things. If you ever go out in nature and there's bugs crawling around you all the fucking time, it's like, yeah, that's a infinite source of food that humans have always tapped into. Only in westernized societies do we think that shit's disgusting. And on top of that, there's always animals out there. And so, you know, killing animals and stuff. But it would require critical thinking, creativity, and physical fitness to be able to do. Literally, natural selection has made it so that human beings who are able to hunt efficiently, meaning basically the modern equivalent would be in top physical shape, being strong, being conditioned, basically being a high-level athlete, And then obviously eating a lot of meat, because that's the whole purpose of being athletic and robust and strong in evolution. This is the most important thing first and foremost. And so the plants and stuff that you eat on top of that are only the icing of the cake. So, and also I'll say that like the blood of the animal also probably had a lot of glycogen and glucose in it as well. So to think that a carnivorous diet is meant to be zero carb is kind of an interesting thing if you think about it. Because if you ate the blood that comes with the salt, you probably ate the glucose and glycogen as well. And fresh meat in the wild would also have glycogen and glucose in it as well, most likely. So I'm just throwing it out there. So anyway, what's the best diet for humans? It's a highly nuanced topic, and I just don't even know how productive of a conversation it is to think about, what is the absolute best diet that everyone should follow. I just think that it's such an extremely complicated and complex and nuanced conversation that's really hard to kind of like make blanket statements like that. But at the same time, I think that's what makes it such an interesting subject to go through with, So I drink yerba mate, and it's definitely not carnivore. I think the polyphenols are uniquely beneficial to a lot of people under certain circumstances. But polyphenols are not in and of themselves essential or universally beneficial to everyone. So, yeah, there needs to be rational thinking and reasonable universal principles, probably the protein intake, then calorie intake, and then sure, there's essential micronutrients, but they depend on the diet too. Not everyone's going to need 100% of your daily dose of vitamin C, vitamin B12, or vitamin B6 or whatever, vitamin B1. All of these vitamins and minerals are dependent upon the diet in which you eat every day. So even that you can't go by, what's the best recommendation for everyone? Like the government has tried for years to give recommendations on a universal way for everyone to follow. And yeah, it's profit driven. It's, corporately driven, but it's industry sponsored and whatnot. But still, I'm just saying, that's just, I don't know how effective that is, right? So instead, we look at, well, what exactly is your goal? What symptoms do you have that you're trying to overcome? And then what is a way that we can use nutrition and supplementation and stuff to overcome that? And that's what evidence-based nutrition is all about. It's just, so if you're looking for, by the way, if you're looking for consultations, a nutritionist, or someone to help you crack this code, send me a DM on Instagram, at Coach Wolfgang VL. And we can schedule a consultation where I can coach you through the process of finding what works for you and going through this process to where you don't have to worry about all the confusion of what you don't even know what to believe and stuff, right? And just know at first it's going to be a hard thing, because we have to try a bunch of stuff. But at least I can help guide you through the process so that for you it might take 3 to 4 months to find what works for you using a coach like myself, using a nutritionist, a health consultant. But for me, it took me a number of years. It really took me maybe 4 years. Yeah, it took me about 4 years to find out what the hell was really going on. From 2012 to 2016. Really, it took me till 2018 to really figure it out. So, yeah, it's probably a better way to put it. Yeah, 6 years it took me. So, a lot of people, though, go decades never figuring out what's wrong with their problems. So, yeah, let me know. And, leave me a comment down below, and I'll talk to y'all next time.